Welcome back to the deep dive. I want to start today by asking you to visualize something that, well, we all just accept it as normal, but when you really look at it, it's kind of bizarre.
Okay.
Think back to high school. You walk into a room, you sit in a row, and for exactly 52 minutes, you learn history.
Right.
Then a bell rings. You stand up, walk down a hall, sit in another row, and for 52 minutes, you learn algebra.
Yeah, it's the industrial rhythm. I mean, it's basically the factory floor.
Exactly. And it doesn't matter if you finish the history lesson in 20 minutes or if you were completely lost in algebra. The bell rings, the conveyor belt moves, and you go to the next station.
Which is, it's the million-dollar question, right? Why do we do it that way?
Right.
What you're describing is the time-based model of education. It's been the global standard for over a century. But today, we're looking at a stack of sources that suggest this factory model isn't just outdated, it's actively harmful.
Yeah, we are diving into competency-based curriculum, or CBC. Sometimes you'll hear it called competency-based education, CBE. And I'll be honest, when I first saw the topic, I thought, great, more educational jargon.
Sounds very corporate.
It does. But looking at these sources, we've got educational theory, a massive real-world experiment happening in Kenya right now, and insights from the MIT Teaching Systems Lab. This isn't just jargon, it's a complete dismantling of how school actually works.
It really is. We're talking about a global shift from knowing stuff to doing stuff. And more importantly, a shift from how long did you sit there to did you actually master the skill?
But that's the tricky part, isn't it? I mean, mastery sounds great on motivational poster, but how do you actually implement that in a building with 1,000 teenagers?
That is exactly what our mission is today. We're going to unpack all of this. We've got the heavy theory from the Biotech Whisperer to give us the architectural blueprints.
The architects of curriculum.
Right. Then we have the MIT Teaching Systems Lab, which studies the mechanics of how this fails or succeeds in the U.S. context. And then we have this incredible deep dive into Kenya, courtesy of Igara Kabaji TV and Elimu Kenya, where they are literally replacing their entire national curriculum with this model.
It's a massive high-stakes experiment. But before we get to the classroom chaos, and I definitely want to talk about that chaos, we need to understand where this idea came from. Because I always assumed the curriculum was just, I don't know, handed down on stone tablets.
Not quite. Curriculum is engineered. It's designed.
Mm-hmm.
And to understand CBC, you have to understand the designs that came before it.
Okay.
The sources outline 3 specific models. Think of them as the 3 different architects of school.
So lay out the blueprints for us. Who's the first architect?
First, you have the Tyler model.
Ugh.
This is from Rolf Tyler in the 1940s. I kind of think of him as the assembly line manager.
The 1940s. So we are in the peak industrial era here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Tyler's approach was very linear, very efficient. He basically said, step 1, define the objective. Step 2, design the experience. Step 3, organize it. Step 4, evaluate it.
So it's a straight line.
A completely straight line. If the objective is to learn long division, you teach it, test it, and move on.
Okay, but that sounds logical enough. What's the problem with that?
The problem is it treats the student as a product to be processed. It doesn't account for the fact that the product might have feelings or, do different learning speeds or might just be hungry that day. It's incredibly rigid.
So who came along and tried to fix it?
That brings us to the second architect, Wheeler, the Wheeler model.
Yeah.
He looked at Tyler's straight line and said, this is wrong. Learning isn't a line, it's a circle.
A circle, like a loop.
A cycle, yeah. He argued that curriculum should be dynamic, not static. You start with exploring needs and interests, you plan, you teach, you evaluate, but then, and this is the key part, you use that evaluation to circle back and change the plan.
Oh, I see. So it's a feedback loop. So if the class fails the test, you don't just blame the kids. You blame the plan and you fix it.
Ideally, yes. But the third model, and this is the one you really need to pay attention to for today's topic, is the Tubba model, Hilda Tubba.
She's the disruptor.
She's the doctor. Her model is often called the teacher-centered or bottom-up approach. Tyler started with the objectives, what the state wants. Tyler started with the diagnosis of needs, what the student wants.
Wow, that feels like a massive pivot. Instead of saying, here is the math you must learn, she's asking, what do these specific kids actually need to know?
Precisely. She believed teachers should be the ones designing the curriculum based on that diagnosis. And that is the DNA of competency-based curriculum. It's an engineering model that says we don't care about the schedule, we care about the diagnosis and the outcome.
Okay, so we have the theory down. Taba gave us the permission to diagnose needs. But let's look at the core definition of CBC itself, because the MIT source had a comparison that honestly stopped me in my tracks.
It's the core philosophy of the whole movement. In the traditional system, the one we all grew up in, time is fixed, but learning is variable.
Time is variable, time is fixed, learning is variable. Unpack that for us.
You have 180 days of school. That is fixed. You have 3 weeks for fractions. Fixed. At the end of the 3 weeks, everyone takes a test.
Right.
Some kids get an A, so they learned 100%. Some get a C, maybe 70%. Some get an F. So the learning varies. But regardless of the grade, the whole class moves on to decimals on Monday.
Which is wild when you actually say it out loud. I mean, if I only learned 60% of how to drive a car, you wouldn't say, okay, great, let's move on to highway driving.
You'd crash. And that is exactly why we have what educators call the Swiss cheese problem.
Swiss cheese?
Yeah, you have holes in your foundation.
Yeah.
If you never really got fractions, decimals are going to be a nightmare and algebra is going to be impossible. Eventually, the whole structure collapses. Competency-based education flips the script entirely.
Oh, so?
In CBC, learning is fixed, but time is variable.
So wait, everyone has to get the A.
Everyone has to master the competency. If it takes you 3 weeks, great. If it takes you 6 weeks, that's also great. You do not move on until you can do it.
Okay, I'm going to play the skeptic here. Time is variable sounds beautiful in a TED Talk, but in the real world, that sounds like chaos. If I'm a parent and my kid is still on chapter 1 while the neighbor's kid is on chapter 10, am I not going to freak out?
You absolutely might. And that is the biggest hurdle. The sources from Kenya touch on this. Parents are terrified that variable time just means their kid is falling behind. But the counter-argument, which is really strong in the literature, is the video game analogy.
Oh, hit me with the video game analogy.
Think about playing a video game. You're on level 1. You try to beat the boss, and you fail. Does the game say, well, you try for 20 minutes, that's enough time, here is level 2?
No, the game says, game over, try again. You stay on level 1 until you beat the boss.
Exactly. And you don't feel ashamed about it. You just practice until you master the skills to beat the boss. That is CBC. You stay on the topic until you unlock the next level. The argument is that pushing a kid to level 2 without the weapons from level 1 is actually cruel. It sets them up to fail.
That makes total sense. But it requires a massive shift in how we view success. It's not about being fast anymore. It's about being thorough.
Right. It shifts the question from what do you know to what can you do? And what can you do is where we get into the actual competencies.
Yeah, the Elimir Kenya source listed 7 core competencies. And it wasn't just math and science.
No, it's much broader.
It was things like communication and collaboration, critical thinking and problem solving, imagination and creativity.
Citizenship is in there too. Digital literacy.
And my favorite, self-efficacy.
Oh, and learning to learn. That's the one that always sticks with me. Because if you master how to learn, the content doesn't matter as much. You can adapt to anything the future throws at you.
Which brings us perfectly to Kenya, because talking about learning to learn at MIT is one thing. Rolling this out to millions of students across an entire developing nation is a whole other beast.
It is a massive, massive undertaking. To understand the stakes, you have to look at what they're replacing. Kenya used the 844 system for decades. And the source from Igara Kabaji TV, who is a professor there, he does not mince words about it. He calls it a system of massive wastage.
Wastage. That is a really heavy word to use when you're talking about children.
It was a pressure cooker. You study for years, take one massive exam, and if you fail, you're done.
Wow.
It created this intense cutthroat competition for grades. The goal of the new CBC system is to align with their Vision 2030, to produce people who can actually think and create jobs, not just look for them.
So let's look at the new structure. They're moving to a 26333 model.
All right, it breaks down the old blocks. You've got pre-primary for 2 years, focusing mostly on play, then primary for 6 years, junior secondary, which is like middle school, for 3 years. But the part that really illustrates the CBC difference is senior school, grades 10 through 12.
Yes, this is where the pathways come in. And this is what I meant about ditching the factory model. Because usually high school is just high school. Everyone takes English, everyone takes math. But here, you literally choose a lane.
You choose a specialized pathway based on your potential. There are 3 main buckets. First, you have arts and sports science.
Okay, pause. Sports science as a high school major.
Yes, and it's not just extra gym class. If you are a talented athlete, you are studying the mechanics of the body, sports ethics, training regimens. You are treating your talent as a valid academic pursuit.
That's incredible.
Same goes for the performing arts track under that umbrella. Music, dance, theater, film.
Think about how many kids dropped out of the old system because they were brilliant dancers, but terrible at calculus.
Exactly. That is the wastage Professor Kabaji was talking about. Then you have the social sciences pathway. Languages, including indigenous languages, Mandarin, French, plus humanities and business.
Okay, but the third one, the STEM pathway, is where it gets really specific.
Oh, yeah. Break that down.
Obviously, you have pure sciences, but they also have technical and engineering tracks. We're talking tracks for mechatronics, aviation technology, marine technology.
AV technology. In high school.
Yes. Imagine a 16-year-old who struggles with Shakespeare but can strip an engine blindfolded. In the old system, that kid is a failure. In this system, that kid is a future aviation engineer. It validates completely different types of intelligence.
And there's a vocational track too, right? Under STEM?
Yeah, career and technology studies, hairdressing, plumbing, welding. It puts trade skills on the exact same level of respect as academic skills.
I also want to touch on the inclusivity aspect here, because usually when educational systems get rigorous, kids with special needs get left behind. But the source from Elimu, Kenya seemed to imply the exact opposite.
It's central to the whole design. They have a differentiated curriculum for special needs education. For learners with profound disabilities, the milestones are totally different. They move from foundation, which is learning activities of daily living, to intermediate, and then to pre-vocational.
And pre-vocational is learning to use tools.
Right. The example they gave was using crochet hooks or basic tools, which leads directly into vocational training. Tailoring, cooking. The goal is independence. It's not about forcing them to learn algebra. It's about asking, what can you do to contribute and be self-sufficient?
It sounds incredibly humane. And here is the giant but who is supposed to teach all
That
that?
is the human element, and that is where the rubber meets the road.
Because if I'm a teacher and you tell me, okay, forget the lecture, you have 30 kids, 5 are doing aviation, 5 are doing math, 10 are stuck on level 1 and 10 are on level 5, go. I mean, I'm quitting.
It is a fundamental shift in the job description. The sources say the teacher is no longer the sage on the stage. They are now the facilitator.
Facilitator. That feels like a corporate buzzword. That just means we're going to pay you the same to do 3 times the work.
It definitely requires more work, or at least very different work. The teacher isn't a reservoir of knowledge anymore. They are an architect of the environment. They have to diagnose each student, remember Taba, and figure out, okay, this kid needs a visual aid. This kid needs to go outside and build something.
The sources mentioned multiple intelligences. Howard Gardner's theory.
Right. The teacher has to be a detective. Is this kid linguistic, logical, musical? And then they tailor the learning materials to that.
And the terminology change for the students is fascinating too. Under this system, they aren't slow learners anymore.
No, they're time takers.
Time takers.
I know it sounds a bit euphemistic at first, but if you truly accept that time is variable, it's actually accurate. Slow implies a deficit. Time taker just implies a different pace on the timeline.
I can definitely see the intention there. But let's look at the parents for a second. Because the source from Agara Kabaji TV had a pretty funny little dig at the parents lamenting on social media.
Oh, the backlash is very real. Because CBC demands parental engagement. It's not optional. There is a component called community service learning. So if your kid learns about agriculture in school, their homework is to go home and literally build a seedbed.
So the parent has to buy the seeds, find the dirt, and supervise the construction.
Exactly. You can't just check the report card at the end of the term anymore. You are a co-educator. And a lot of parents are saying, hey, I have a full-time job. I thought school was supposed to handle this.
It totally blurs the line between home and school.
Yeah.
Which actually brings us to the values. Why are they pushing the system so hard? Is it just to get better workers for the economy?
It's bigger than that. The Kenyan sources emphasize value-based education. VBE. They are explicitly teaching character.
Like what kind of values?
Love, responsibility, respect, unity, peace, patriotism, integrity. The source explicitly states that the goal is to reduce corruption, nepotism, and social injustice in their future society.
That is a fascinating connection to make. So the idea is if you change the curriculum, you can actually change the national character.
That's the bet they're making. They believe that the old cutthroat system bred corruption because winning the exam was the only thing that mattered. If you raise a generation that values collaboration over competition, maybe you get a more stable, just society.
But let's ground this in reality for a minute. The MIT teaching system's lab source kind of throws a bucket of cold water on some of this idealism.
Yeah, Justin Wright from MIT. He's the realist in our stack of sources. He points out that you can change the labels, you can change the report cards, but if you don't change the actual mechanics of the school, nothing happens.
He talked about competency-based report cards, right?
Yes. He notes that many schools in the U.S. already have report cards that list skills, can add fractions, can write a thesis statement. But the classroom itself is still totally traditional. The teacher is still lecturing to the whole group at the same time.
So it's purely cosmetic.
Exactly. True implementation requires rethinking the schedule, the architecture of the building, the way teachers are paid and trained. If you just slap a competency sticker on a factory model, you just get a confused factory.
And in Kenya, the timeline for all this is incredibly tight. They are basically building the plane while flying it.
It's fast. The first cohort enters grade 9 in 2025, senior school in 2026, and they graduate high school in 2028.
So in 2028, the universities are going to receive this massive wave of kids who have specialized in sports science or marine tech. Are the universities even ready for that?
That is the big question. If the university entrance exam is still just a standardized paper test, then all this differentiation hits a brick wall. The whole tertiary ecosystem has to change to catch these kids.
It feels like we are watching a massive tectonic shift in education. We're moving away from the industrial model towards something, well, something more human, but also way more messy.
Messy is definitely the right word, but maybe learning is supposed to be messy.
So let's wrap this up with a final thought for you to mull over. We talk about the architects, the time takers, the aviation tracks. But there is one implication here from the MIT and Kenyan sources that really spins me out.
I think I know where you're going with this.
If we truly accept the video game model, that learning is fixed and time is variable, and we accept that some kids are time takers who just need more time to master the skills.
Are we ready to let go of the idea of everyone graduating at age 18?
That is the ultimate question. If a student needs until age 20 to master the competencies, does society view them as a failure? Or do we accept that they just needed more time?
And conversely, if a kid masters everything by the time they're 15, do we just let them leave?
Exactly. If the calendar doesn't matter anymore, then the social rituals of finishing school, high school graduation, prom, the magic age of 18, they all start to dissolve.
It redefines childhood itself.
It really does. What does finishing school even mean if it's based on capability rather than the calendar?
Well, on that existential note, we will leave you to ponder your own competencies. Are you a time taker, a master, or are you just waiting for the bell to ring? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
See you next time.